he has said, and I don't know how he quantifies it, so I'll just admit I don't know how he quantifies it, but he says that the number one influence in the life of a junior hire is mom and dad.
Parents, it's time to celebrate. The new On Purpose Parents podcast, a Saddleback Parents podcast, has arrived, and we're here to help you win at parenting. As parents ourselves, we know that parenting is the toughest, most important job on the planet. You can't possibly do it alone. And now you don't have to, because we're your people. Connect with us by texting the word parents to the number 83000, visiting us at onpurposeparents.com, and tuning in every Wednesday with Kurt, Grace, and Chris for tips, ideas, and encouragement to help you win at being an on-purpose parent.
Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of On Purpose Parents. As always, I'm with you today. My name is Kurt Johnson. I'm with my co-host,
Grace.
And as always, in the corner where he belongs.
Hey, everybody.
Sitting quietly is
laying it on thick.
Producer Chris.
Yay, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you very
Good to
much.
see you, Chris. You're doing a great job. You look good as always.
Oh, thanks, man.
Good to see you guys again.
Now, Grace, you don't really need to comment on this because it's kind of awkward, but you can nod.
Okay, all right.
Have you noticed Chris always smells very nice?
Oh, I haven't
You
noticed
haven't noticed
that.
that. Okay.
But I am not surprised
There
if
you
that's
go.
true.
It is true. He comes in my office. We meet on the regular, and I've never told him this, but every time he comes in, it just smells so good.
Wow.
I do that
Smells
misty
so
thing where I spray the cologne up and I walk into it.
It's not just your natural scent.
No,
You're not like most.
but I do shower.
You're not like most junior high boys with Axe body spray that
No, that is
spray
Lay it on
on
thick.
none of that
16
stuff.
ounces at once. But that explains why a week ago when we did our kickoff, our launch
Our
episode.
podcast number one.
Podcast number one. If you didn't listen to it, listeners, it's not too late. Go back. You can go back and catch up. We're only 2 episodes in.
Yeah.
But Grace, remember he brought us each a gift?
Yes, it was so sweet. I got a bundle of beautiful flowers.
Yes. And I got a little thing of cologne.
I know.
He gave me cologne as a welcome gift, which
my
makes so
goodness.
much sense because he smells so good all the time.
He's sharing his love.
Or it was a very passive aggressive
Yeah.
hint. Here's what we're going to jump in today, and we're going to jump in quick, and we're gonna move through this. But it's a really important topic.
Mm-hmm.
In our last episode, we touched on this idea of like a parenting plan.
Yeah.
And Chris, you had mentioned that you did a search, and your research showed that what most parents who do Google searches about parenting are searching for is some sort of parenting plan,
Yes.
a parenting strategy, right? Which is fantastic because as a podcast on Purpose Parents, we believe in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We really believe, we may not believe in like a plan that you have to follow A plus B equals C every time. No such thing exists, right? That only exists in math. 2 plus 2 only equals 4 every single time in math, right?
Does it?
1 plus 2.
No, it does.
Maybe not.
No, it does. You're right. You're right.
Wait,
That's good.
you're in charge of the budget?
I know, and math was my worst subject. So
You're in charge of the budget.
don't tell anyone.
She's a new math. This new math, these youngsters.
I know.
These youngsters like Grace.
I know.
are
I love
learning.
being called a youngster here. That's fantastic. Doesn't happen often these days, but I'll take it.
This is one of the only rooms where you're called a youngster.
I'm the young one here. I love it.
Okay.
When we're talking about plans and stuff like that, it's just how much parents care so deeply about their kids, right?
That does, yes.
And they want to all of us, we want our kids to be prepared. So we want to have a plan for our kids to be prepared. And them searching that, people just listening to this podcast right now is you guys are doing such an amazing job as parents, a much better job than you think you're doing.
And I that's a good point, Chris. I don't think people are looking for a parenting plan because they want to take just give me the shortest route. They don't want just the shortest, easiest route. They want to do it right.
Yeah.
Like I think that reflects that most parents really understand the severity of the journey, the consequences,
Right.
and they want to get it right. And we exist as a podcast to help you maybe sort of kind of get it right.
Yeah. Right.
No guarantees, but we think we have stumbled upon and created what is a pretty solid way to purpose or to parent on purpose.
Yeah.
And part of that is having the end in mind.
Yep.
And like we talked about last time around, that at Saddleback Parents and our On Purpose Parent podcast, we would say, we just, it's just our voices, but we would say that the goal of parenting is to raise your children to become interdependent, lifelong followers of Jesus who want to make a kingdom contribution. That's the end goal. Oh, well, how do you do that? Well, there's all kinds of ways that you do that. But what we're going to focus on today, and we're going to give today like a flyby, right? A 30,000 foot flyby.
Yep.
And then in future episodes, a few episodes from now, we'll start taking a deeper look at each one of these pieces. But what we would say is the first step to becoming an on-purpose parent is to really, as a parent, understand and lean into, don't avoid, don't dismiss the different ages and stages that your children are in, and the roles and goals that you as a parent might have during those ages and stages that your children find themselves in, if that makes sense. So there's ages and stages of our kids, and subsequently there are roles and goals that we as parents find ourselves in. And just like our children change, the roles and goals of parenting change along the way, on the way to this big goal of interdependent, lifelong followers of Jesus who desire to make a kingdom impact.
Yeah. And that concept has been so helpful for me, because just even before we dive into these ages and stages and the roles and goals, like you said, Kurt, what we're going to talk about, I just want to say off the bat that it's so easy as parents to tie our identity and our worth and our value in being parents. And I just want to start off by saying our identity, worth, and our value is not in being a parent. And what I mean by that is it's very easy, again, to get tied to a role, to a certain stage, and to get validated in a certain way, in a certain stage. And all the constantly changing stages of our kids and parenting can feel kind of threatening or like whiplash or just really confusing at times. But I do think when we feel and remember that our worth is just being a child of God, you know, that we are good enough right now, you know, without any other contribution that we need to make, it can really, I guess, free us and put us in a mindset where we can be open. And like you said, to lean into all the changing stages and be excited even to change alongside our kids as they go through so much transformation as they grow up. So I'm really excited to kind of look into all those stages too with that mindset.
Yeah, me too. And you didn't really say this, but as you were talking, it made me think of this. There's kind of these two extremes in parenting, right? There's and listeners might be able to identify which were my parents. And some parents are kind of this healthy middle, but I think most of us were raised by one of two extremes. My wife and I, she was raised by one extreme, I was raised by the other. Her dad was a police officer. And so law and order, right? Rules will be followed, black and white. What I say is the law. Don't get out of line, all that stuff. I was raised in what I would almost call like a laissez-faire house. My parents loved me. I knew they loved me, but boy, oh boy, did they let me figure life out on my own. Right? So almost hands off.
Yeah.
Almost hands off. And you know, and you look at those two extremes, and kind of the modern day version of maybe the overbearing isn't maybe so authoritative, but it's where we get that idea of like the helicopter parents, right? I used to call, before Uber was a word for transportation, I used to use the word Uber parent, like a super parent. Like I'm an Uber parent. I'm all about my kids, right? And we hear I'm a tiger mom, and what they call it, a bear mama, or what they call it?
Oh, mama bear.
Mama bear, right? I'm a mama bear.
Yeah.
Which I get, but there can be a little bit of like overbearing stuff. Or the opposite is parents who really aren't all that engaged. And so if we're not careful, what we're going to talk about today and then in subsequent episodes can, if we're not careful, push us a little bit into the helicopter parent, a little bit into the mama bear, a little bit into the maybe too controlling. Yeah. We want this too bad.
Right.
We want this too much for our kids. And so we got to strike the balance. So as we dig into this, listeners, kind of check where you're at, because for some of you who are more laissez-faire, this will sound way too prescriptive.
Yeah.
Way too strategic. Come on. I just want my kids to be kids. Some of you who are maybe a little bit more, you lean towards the mama bear, the overly involved,
Right.
the overly concerned, which it's hard to even say that. It's
Yeah.
almost impossibly overly concerned for
But
a
it's
parent.
intense. There's an
It's
intensity
intense.
there.
You know, this might, if you're not careful, could reinforce some of that in a way that maybe it doesn't need
Become
to.
unhealthy.
Yep. So maybe strike that balance as we
good.
jump into this. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend a few minutes and we're going to look at the 5 ages and stages that we've identified. There's no real science behind it. And then the roles and goals, and the ages and stages are really just broken up, kind of how they progress through society.
Yeah.
The grade school years, the kindergarten, all that kind of stuff. And then what are our roles and goals as parents? So here's what I'll do. I'll jump in with the first one,
Great.
and then Grace, you can go from there. First of all, the first stage, and parents, if you're listening, if you want to see this little graph, we've made a really cool graph or chart that helps chart all this. If you'll go to our Instagram page, you can do it right now as you're listening if you want. But the @SaddlebackParents, that's our handle for our Instagram page. And you'll see this little circular chart, kind of like a flow chart. It's blue and yellow in color, blue and orange, and it will work you through this. And you might want to follow along as we go through this. But the first stage and age that your children find yourself in is that sort of like birth through kindergarten, right? And that's a kind of a natural clumping, the birth through the kindergarten. There's some unique stuff going on. And the phrase we've given, your role as a parent, the role that we've kind of assigned you as a parent for your birth through kindergartner is that of a caregiver. That in birth through kindergarten, kind of your primary role is caregiver, which makes sense, right? Your kids aren't doing much on their own at that age. Your kids have recently come out of that age.
Yeah.
And-
And I would say it is a beautiful stage. You know, it's a stage of wonder and a lot of thrilling firsts. I mean, it's like you're starting with the miracle of life and all the transitions that you go through, but it's also an incredibly physically demanding stage. I mean, it is so hands-on. You are doing everything. You are literally the caregiver.
Right.
Without you, your child cannot survive. You are changing diapers, you're putting on clothes, you're taking off clothes, you're giving them a bath, you're feeding them. Everything depends on you,
Right.
and it's so physical.
Right.
It reminds me of a story. When I was, I think, about 4, so around that stage, I really loved playing doctor. And I used to play with this glass thermometer, not the fancy kinds that we have these days, you know, where you like kind of just point at it,
Right.
but where you put
The
under your
old
tongue.
school,
The
yeah.
old school, and the little red bar kind of
Yeah.
like creeps up. And one evening, my parents had guests over, and I was playing, and it broke in my mouth. And I was like, I actually wasn't that nervous. I remember feeling like, oh, whoopsies, like I broke it. I better go tell my mom and dad. So I walk over to them and I show them my tongue with all the glass pieces on it. And I still remember distinctly feeling really surprised at that all the freaking out that happened right after. My dad grabbed me by my ankles, flipped me upside down. Then all the parents like ran into the bathroom. He was shaking me over the toilet. Then my mom's like poking me all over and like trying to flush out my mouth. And now, as an adult and as a mom, I can totally understand
Right.
why they were freaking out and why I was never allowed to play with a thermometer again. But I think the point is this stage, I mean, it is so intense
Right.
and it can be so exhausting.
Right.
And so we do just want to say to parents in this stage, you know, that we see you, we see how hard you're working. It can feel like it's never going to end and that you're not doing anything right because things like your kid breaking a thermometer in their mouth happens and it can get overwhelming at times. But we do want to encourage parents in this stage, in this very hands-on caregiving stage, that it will pass. It is a season and that they are doing, as you know, producer Chris was saying earlier, they are doing so much better than they may be giving themselves credit for.
Right. And even though it's a pretty young age, birth to kindergarten, it's a really, really important age.
It's important.
Child development specialists and doctors and all the experts out there, what they will say is that the most development in a human being's life happens from birth to age 2. That's when the most development happens, from
Right.
birth to age 2. And you think about it, that's when you kind of learn to talk, you learn to walk, you learn to what to say no, you learn what's yours, and you start to learning how to share. I mean, your brain just develops like crazy
Yeah.
from 0 to 2. And really, when you think about it, from 2 to 5, there's a lot of change, right? And that's why the goal of parenting, I think, in this age is actually really important, because of the impression that they're so impressionable.
Yeah.
They're just little tiny sponges, and they are seeing so much more, which is why it's fascinating to me. My grandson Miller is just turned 2 recently, and he's just now really starting to talk a lot more.
Yeah.
But what you realize when they start talking is how much they know. They've been absorbing all this information for 2 years. They just don't know how to share it.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he knows how to share it, and he just, it's like, holy smokes, how did he learn all this? Well, he learned it all along. He just didn't know how to express it, right? And so the goal for this stage as a caregiver, the goal for parents as we would see it is for your children to see your faith.
Yeah.
To see your faith. Now, remember, we're talking at a higher level goal for parenting, right?
Yeah.
Interdependent, lifelong followers of Jesus who desire to make a kingdom contribution. So with that in mind, the goal at this stage for parents, with that end in mind, is that your children would see your faith, that they would recognize, they would see how you respond. They would see even things like we go to church together. I tell my wife I love her. They see me praying. They see me asking them to pray. All the things that they're observing in their little minds, because what we've learned is they're absorbing all of that, even though we don't necessarily realize that they are.
Yeah, and I love what you said is that they may not have the words to articulate it. That's such a good reminder for parents in this stage, because if they're not communicating back to you, it's easy to just think, nothing's happening.
Right.
But like you said, this stage is when they are experiencing, little human beings for the very first time, who they are and how the world is to them. And they can experience through your caregiving, again, without being able to say thank you to you and be able to express and articulate all the wonderful things you are doing for them. But they are experiencing that they are loved, that they are wanted, that they belong to a family. And that's just such a powerful thing in that stage.
So as we move through here, another way, a visual to think of it, parents, is think of these roles as almost like the hats that you wear. So your first hat that you wear is the hat of a caregiver. Now, what we're doing as we move through this is, in some ways, we're just adding hats. It's pretty rare that you take off the other hat completely.
What? I can't take it off?
You can't?
Please?
No, because the next stage is when your kids enter elementary school. So it's the grades 1 to 5, the elementary years. And your primary role is still pretty much a caregiver, but not as much.
Yeah.
They can feed themselves. They can maybe at a certain age they're walking to school or whatever the case may be, right? They can start to do chores. They can clean up after themselves. They can wipe their own bottom. They can wipe their own bottoms at this age, right? Like,
that's
hey,
a big deal. That is a real big deal.
That's a big deal. It's a very important milestone.
Yeah.
That I'm still trying to perfect. Anyway,
I took our neighbor kids to the park close by, and they're all, they were all younger, little kids, and hey, Chris, I got to go to the bathroom. So, okay, here's the card, and opens it, and goes to the bath. Then pretty soon I hear, Chris, come in here and help. And I'm like, dude, what do you help? What? He's like, come wipe my bottom. I said, I am not going to go in there. And, why? Do you not know how to know? So I'm like, pull the toilet, and it was
just do it.
Gosh,
I'm like, I
it.
forgot about those days,
Yeah.
man.
And I do not think I'm allowed to do that for my neighbor's child. I am not allowed to do that. You're going to stink on your way home, son.
Yeah.
It's going to be an itchy, stinky walk home. But you're okay. Anyway, enough of that. That's the junior high pastor.
But it's definitely such a fun stage too. I mean, this age, they're just like learning so much and absorbing so much.
Which stage are we talking about?
This crafter, 1 through 5.
Thank you, because we didn't get there yet.
Okay.
We didn't get to crafter.
All right, let's do it.
No, well, we just didn't tell them that they were the crafter.
Yes.
That's so.
You're right.
We have a C word. We don't do anything around here without it. Like, what's that word?
Alliteration.
Alliteration.
Yes.
Thank you. So if you're a
Very
caregiver, now you're a crafter. In elementary school, from grades 1 to 5, you're a crafter. So Grace, why don't you, as you were starting to, why don't you kind of unpack what that means?
Yeah. Well, for me, this is the stage that I'm in right now. My second daughter is in 2nd grade and my first daughter is in 5th grade. And so this is really a stage, if I were to describe where my kids are at, where there's just so much abundance of learning happening. It's where they're starting to gain some independence and have a voice. It's such a fun stage too, because you're still the world to your kids. They still kind of care about you a little bit more than your friends at this stage yet. But they can interact with you with a little more independence and personality and have a voice. And it's just so exciting in terms of learning. I mean, whether it's like learning how to ride a bike or learning how to do multiplication, or just social skills like how to stand in line, or even emotional skills like, what am I feeling? These are feelings that I don't know what they are, and giving them a name and learning how to, kind of gain some, intelligence around that. So it's just a really fun, active stage, I think.
Yeah. And another way to think of this stage is from crafter is almost like you're a foundation builder, right? So when we came up with the word crafter, we were thinking about the first word I came up with, which nobody liked, was I came up with cop. And then I softened it to corrector, right? Because so much of our role with kids this age is, hey, not in our household.
Yeah.
Hey, this is right, this is wrong.
Yeah.
These are the consequences for your decisions, right? We're doing all that policing of our kids. But what we're really doing in that, especially if we want to do it in a more positive way, is we're crafting who they're becoming.
Yeah.
We're laying a foundation upon which we're going to build their character and their values and their belief system and their worldview. And these are the years that happens, right? As somebody who's worked with children and youth, my teenagers, my entire ministry career, I'm 34 years into church work. This is the age that I've spent my whole life focusing on. It's really, really interesting how many adults I talk to, and you say, when did you come to faith in Jesus Christ? And it's like a massive percentage is in elementary school. In elementary school, right? Or they'll say, well, when I was a teenager or when I was in my 20s, and almost all of them, though, will point back and say, but, I remember in elementary school, my parents taking me to church all the time.
Right.
Or I made a decision, but it didn't totally settle in until I was older, but the foundation was being laid. Another way you could think of it at this age would be seed planter.
Yeah.
You're planting the seeds, you're watering, you might not see a harvest for a little bit later, right? So all of that is like this crafting job of parents that we have
in that same meeting. I actually brought up the word cultivator.
You did.
And then what I heard from cultivator was
That also didn't fly.
It didn't, primarily because I didn't know how to spell it. It's like, if it's going to be on our chart, I have to know how to spell it.
You have to be able to Can you spell crafter?
I can.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
K-R,
We won't put-
Oh, that's the macaroni. That's macaroni and cheese. I can spell crafter. But you're right. Producer Chris, I, in this setting, I just have to call him Producer Chris. Just, he needs to know his role. Producer Chris needs to know
putting him in his
role
place.
on this podcast.
I'm going to mute my mic.
Is to chime in appropriately, which he just did, because the cultivating piece is exactly it, Chris. I mean, that's exactly, we are cultivating and growing and planting seeds and crafting the stuff that is going to really, that's what everything else gets built upon.
Right.
It's a foundation building time. We talk about that in ministry, in church ministry.
Right.
The reason so many kids ministries focus on the basic things, the Bible stories, all that, is because that's the foundation. And then in youth ministry, you build all the other stuff on that foundation, right?
Yeah.
And so parents of elementary kids, I know you think sometimes, oh man, the teenage years are going to be crazy and scary, and they can be, and we'll talk about that. But a whole bunch of, not all, there's no guarantees when your kids hit the teenage years. But one of the things that does help inform a child's teenage years is how well mom and dad have crafted them in the elementary years.
And I think it's such an encouragement for parents like me right now who are in this stage to be really intentional about what we're doing in this stage, because just like you said, Kurt, we have so much opportunity as on-purpose parents to have an impact, on influence on these foundational things in life. And I think for me, it's both just having them being able to help your children grow both in their interests and finding their passions and their unique personalities. But also, I mean, I don't know if this is where you were going originally with the word cop, but also to instill disciplines and good habits. When I was, I think in 5th grade, I saw in school during a school assembly when I was 5, kindergarten, I saw 2 5th graders playing the violin, and I was like, so hooked. And I came home and I asked my mom and dad, can I play the violin? And initially they said no, because I was already playing the piano, and, starting a new instrument is a lot of investment and time. And they were like, no, one is enough. But I was so wanting this bad. So every night I literally, my parents have this stack of paper to show, would draw or attempt to draw a violin and leave it on their bed. I would learn how to spell the word violin. I would write it on a piece of paper and leave it on their bed. And so, I mean, my parents, after like a couple months and the stack of paper and this kindergartner that's like begging them, they were like, okay, we'll do this. Apparently this is what you really are passionate about. So I still remember that first day they brought that violin home. And, it had that kind of rented violin smell, and opened the case. And I was so excited. And then I was like, what is this? It was like really awkward, really uncomfortable. There was no good music coming out of it. It was really squeaky. And then pretty much immediately I was like, yeah, I don't want this. I'm done. But then my mom was like, oh no. We went through all of this. You spent 2 months, saying you wanted to do this. We're going to try, at least for a while. And she was the person that made me practice every day. And it wasn't easy as an elementary school kid that just wanted everything to be easy and didn't like things to be hard. But at the end of the day, playing the violin for me was such a great blessing for me throughout my teenage years. And I wouldn't have been able to experience that, one, without my mom encouraging my passions and letting me explore, but 2, also teaching me the disciplines and crafting that I can't just do whatever I want. Sometimes things take hard work.
Yep. My parents would not let me quit sports. Every year when sign-up season came, they would say, now, we just want to make sure you remember. Even when I was in 8th grade and I loved it, right?
Yeah.
But it started when I was in elementary school. We just want to make sure you understand. We're going to spend money. We're going to buy cleats.
Yeah.
You're going to be part of a team. So once you start, you're not allowed to quit.
Right.
You don't have to play next year, but you can't quit this year.
You got to commit for the season.
And they were crafting some character in me, right? They were crafting some responsibility, all that kind of stuff. So the goal, parents, we would say, as a crafter in grades 1 through 5 for your children would be to nurture their faith. So when you're the caregiver in their birth through kindergarten, you're hoping that they see your faith.
Yeah.
As a crafter, and what you're doing now is you're beginning to nurture and craft and form a faith of their own. So that is
awesome.
The second age and stage. Caregiver, crafter. Now we enter the dreaded, what every parent just is terrified of. I think until they go through it oftentimes.
Okay.
Until they go through it oftentimes, because it can be the best season, is when your children are in that middle school season, the grades 6 through 8, junior high / middle school. And the word that we've given for you as a parent, and we'll have to unpack this a little bit, but not really too deeply because it can be misunderstood, is your role with your middle schooler is that of a cheerleader. It's that of a cheerleader. And the reason we came up with that is there are very few seasons in life that are tougher to go through than when you're a middle schooler.
Yeah.
It's when you're insecure, you're too short, you're too tall, you're too fat, you're too skinny. You wish you had curly hair.
Yeah.
You wish you had straight hair. You're realizing maybe for the first time, I don't fit in with the kids I think I should fit in. Or the kids who we were friends in elementary school because we all played the violin. Yeah. Right? But now some of them are cool and they hang out with the cool kids and I'm not the cool kid. And so I'm changing friendship circles. And junior high is a really going through puberty, maybe,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, my goodness.
My friends like girls, but I don't, or my friends don't like boys, but I do. And,
Right.
I mean, it is just wild,
Yeah.
wild with opportunities for insecurity.
Yeah.
Insecurity is probably the number one word I would use to describe most middle schoolers, and what they need in a parent. Now, again, you're not taking off the hat of
Yeah.
crafter, or if you want to say kind of cop or whatever.
Yeah.
You're not taking that
Cultivator.
hot cultivator. You don't take that hat off. You add to that that of being a cheerleader.
Yeah.
They need people who are in their corner. They need people who cheer them on. We are all about you. Yay, you. Go, you. You can do it. You can make it. Don't give up. Don't quit. We love you. We believe in you. God thinks you're awesome. He designed you with a purpose. He made you the way He made you. You're not a mistake. You're not junk. You're the best. And I think if parents of junior hires can just say, more than anything else, we're
Yeah.
going to cheer on our middle schooler, that's maybe the most important season in their life for them to have that from a mom and dad.
I love that. I mean, I feel encouraged with what you just said. I'm going to like take that snippet from the podcast and play it for me every morning. You're good. You're worthy. You're wanted. You're okay. I mean, that's so good. I think you're right. I mean, I don't have kids in this stage yet, so I can just look back to what it was like for me as a middle schooler. And you're absolutely right. It's a stage where your friends and their opinions become so much more important than your parents. What it feels like that. And so when you don't get that affirmation or that acceptance in that circle that you're so longing for, I mean, it can just feel devastating.
Right.
So one of the encouragements I would want to share with our listeners or parents who are going in that stage is just really allow a lot of space for mistakes and for awkwardness and maybe some emotional inconsistency in your kids at this stage. And I can only point to myself again as a kid in this stage. I remember in 7th grade, my dad is a pastor, or he was a pastor. And in 7th grade, I remember during an argument or when I was getting scolded and I was feeling a little emotional, I told my dad, "You love the church more than you love me. And what kind of dad is that?" You know, I threw it out there. But the weird thing is that I distinctly remember thinking after I said that all dramatically is that I really didn't believe it.
Right.
So if I didn't believe it, why did I say it? And if I look back at that time, I had been hearing a lot of narratives about what a pastor's kid's life was like. You know, pastor's kids get a lot of pressure. You know, pastor's kids end up rebelling, or pastor's kids, their parents love the church more than them. And even though I felt like for me, I never really felt that at that age, it was almost like I wanted to like test it out. Like I needed to subconsciously say it to see, is it true? Is it not true? And it's all kind of a confused jumble, but I was like saying things that I knew in my heart of hearts I didn't mean, and it wasn't my experience. And I'll never forget my dad's reaction, which was he didn't really react negatively. He just was sort of like, okay, he kind of listened and created this space for me to just kind of say my stuff and be inconsistent emotionally. Because the next minute I was like, all fine, you know? So I think when I look back, that space that my parents created, that safe space to allow me to be weird, to allow me to be dramatic, to be emotional, or whatever it is that I was going through, and that they were that space, that safe place where I could test that out, and they'll be there for me.
Right. And when you say create space, what you're saying is allow for,
Yes.
right? Allow for inconsistency, allow for what we're not saying is like create distance between you and your child.
Right.
In fact, that's a mistake
Yes.
that a lot of parents make in the adolescent years, especially the middle school years, because some middle school kids are kind of jerks, right? They're jerks to their friends. They're jerks to their siblings. They're jerks to mom and dad. They're mean. They're all the things, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's for the first time in middle school is when parents oftentimes get like the eye roll, or when they were in
And it's
fourth
so
grade.
sad.
It's so sad.
It's so sad.
And when they were in fourth grade, they loved to go to the mall or wherever with mom and dad.
Yeah.
And now it's like, hey, can you just drop me off?
Yes.
I don't want to be seen with you. Or you used to walk them to school, and
Yeah.
now it's like, hey, can you drop me off around the corner from school?
Right.
Right. And oftentimes parents will just decide it would be easier for everybody if I put some distance between me and my children.
Right.
Right. If I gave them some space,
Right.
too much space. I would suggest part of your role as being a cheerleader is go against that intuition.
Yeah.
Go against the grain and lean in, like lean into that relationship with your kids in middle school as a cheerleader, as their biggest fan.
Yes.
Give them
It's beautiful.
allow space, allow
A safe
opportunity,
place.
be a safe place, but don't create like physical, emotional space
Yeah.
between the two of you because they actually need your presence the most.
Yeah.
In fact, a gentleman, his name's Wayne Rice, and he's the founder of this big youth ministry organization.
Okay.
And he has said, and I don't know how he quantifies it, so I'll just admit I don't know how he quantifies it, but he says that the number one influence in the life of a junior higher is mom and dad. They don't act like it's mom and dad,
Yeah.
but it actually still is mom and dad. And the reason friends end up having so much influence is because mom and dad typically advocate that authority. They advocate that influence because it's hard work.
Yeah.
And there's like this influence vacuum that's created, and friends and other influences just kind of automatically
Right.
fill that void. But
Right.
in their heart, most middle school kids still want mom or dad
Yeah.
to be the most influential person in their
Right.
life. And they need us to be their cheerleaders.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. And, you know, and part of that I think is just encouraging ourselves as I'm going to enter the stage with my daughter in 5th grade, is to not take things too personally, you know? And I think if we can do that, we can create that safe place where they can be all that they're at, yet we can still lean in and we don't have to be hurt about it. I mean, we can, I mean, that does happen, but like you said, that maybe a little bit of hurt doesn't cause you to withdraw
Right.
and abdicate, you know, your role as a crafter.
Yep. So now we're gonna hit these last two a little bit more quickly, only because not because they're less important, but my hunch is there's a fewer number of listeners that find themselves in
Yeah.
these stages, but they're super duper important. So the next stage is when your students are in the high school, when your children are in the high school age, kind of grades 9 through 12, and what we would say is, again, you're not taking off. You at this point you've maybe taken off most of your caregiver hat.
Some of them,
Some
hopefully.
of them. I mean, but you're probably still the one providing food. You're probably still the one providing shelter, right? You're the one paying for a chunk of their car insurance,
Right.
whatever
Yeah.
deal you've made.
Yeah.
You're still in the business of crafting. You still are crafting. You still are cheering them on. But there becomes sort of this primary role of a coach.
Yeah.
That really you're a coach. And the picture, the word picture, the analogy there is, think of a sport and how for the most of the time during a football game, most of the time the players are out on the field
Yeah.
doing what they're supposed to do, what they've been coached during
Yeah.
practice to do. Every now and then the coach will call timeout,
Yep.
huddle them back up and say, hey, we've gotten a little bit off track.
Yeah.
Hey, slow it down.
Yeah.
Hey, let's get a little bit more urgency, right? Okay, now go do it again. And they go
Yeah.
out and they do it. And that's a great picture of what parenting high schoolers looks like.
Yeah.
Is what you're really doing is you're sort of coaching them to live out all the things that you've crafted and you've cheer-led into them in the earlier years of their life.
Yes.
And coaches are a little bit more hands-off.
Yeah.
Coaches, they gotta run the playbook, right? The kids
Yeah.
have to. You've poured into them the family values, the family playbook, and then you let them loose on the field of life. And every now and then you coach them up.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I love everything. I'm really glad you guys chose this word. I just love everything about the word coach, the image, the picture, the illustration that it paints. You're not the one playing the game. Like you said, your kids are the ones out on the field. They are the ones playing the game, but you're still up close and personal on the sidelines providing that support. Back to that violin story of mine, by the time I was in high school, it was something that I fully owned. It was something that really was a passion of mine. I really enjoyed it, loved making music. My mom never had to tell me to practice at this stage because it was something I did on my own to achieve my own goals. But during that time in high school, I had a lot of different auditions. And those auditions were so intense and scary. I mean, just waiting in a cold room and then waiting for your name to be called, and then your name gets called. You walk into this room and all these eyeballs are staring at you, and then you just hope that all your practice comes through when you're performing and have to perform. But my mom was always there for me. She was probably there almost in all of my auditions. She would be in the waiting room. She would pray with me before to help, me take a deep breath and calm my nerves. And she was the first person that would see when I was really disappointed afterwards, if I felt like I really kind of messed up. But she was also the first person that would be there to celebrate with me when I came out and was like, yes, I nailed that one. I did such a good job. And that having someone in your corner like that, someone who has coached you and, has taught you and laid the foundational principles and things, yelled at you a lot in elementary, so you practice to get to that stage where now I'm doing it on my own.
Right.
But she's still there for me, providing that support. I
Yep.
mean, it was such a blessing.
Right. It's awesome. And we forgot to give the goal for the middle school years.
Oh, yeah.
We forgot. So
Let's go back.
if you're a cheerleader and you're raising middle schoolers, your role is that of a cheerleader. Your goal, and this is super important at this age, is that they would own their faith, right? Their faith would be something that isn't just mom and dad's. It's not just the faith of their childhood that they inherited.
Yeah.
The old saying, it's a classic saying, of God doesn't have grandkids, right? Like they're not a Christian because mom and dad are Christian, but that the goal for middle schoolers is that they would own their own faith. And then the goal for that of your high school kids as you're coaching them, really the goal, and you think about this goes along with coaching, is that they would activate their faith.
Yeah.
This goes to the part in our kind of our purpose statement, interdependent, lifelong followers of Jesus who want to make a kingdom contribution.
Yes.
So our goal as parents of high schoolers, if our kids are owning their faith, we want to see them activate their faith into the world. Like, hey, God's wired me this way. He shaped me this way. I've got these gifts. I've got these talents, violin, whatever it is, football. I'm fun. I'm popular. Whatever it is. I'm kind. I'm compassionate. All the things that God has done in me. Now we want to activate them. Okay, you're right. You're all of those things, cheerleader. You're all of those things. What are you going to do with it? How might God want to use you to make this world a better place?
Yes.
So you're activating, you're putting opportunities and expectations to take the resources and the way God's wired you into the world.
Yeah.
Because as a teenager, you can do it.
Yeah.
You can do it. You don't have to wait until you're a certain age. And high schoolers are ready, willing, and able to step up to any challenge that adults give them. High schoolers, they can change the world.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? I mean, high schoolers, they're especially in this technology-driven world, they're more
so capable.
Yeah, they're more native than most of the adults. So how are we activating their faith? That's the goal of parenting high schoolers. And then as we bring this thing home, rounding it out, our final never-ending role is the stage of parenting where our children are sort of the college age and beyond.
Yeah.
College age and beyond. And your role there is what we would see is that of a consultant. You're sort of an on-call consultant.
Yeah.
You're there when they need you.
Yeah.
The door is always open. Jim Burns, who's a very well-known and well-respected family pastor, is he a psychologist, producer Chris? Is Jim Burns he's a psychologist, Dr. Jim Burns. There you go. That should have been my first clue. He has a book that we can put in the show notes. I don't know the title. So Chris, but I think
We'll know the author.
I think it is Leave the Porch Light On and the Welcome Mat Out. And it's about how to parent adult children.
Oh, that's a beautiful.
Leave the
picture.
Porch Light On and the Welcome Mat Out by Jim Burns. And that's his way of saying you're a consultant.
Yeah.
You're there to give them input and advice as wanted.
Yes.
Every now and then, especially maybe when they're away at college and they're still young, you might have to be proactive in your consulting. But for the most part, at that age, and Chris and I can attest, Grace, you'll experience this.
We'll experience it in the future.
Unsolicited input to adult children from mom and dad doesn't go over super great. Solicited input goes over really well.
Right.
When they ask, it goes over fantastic. But unsolicited input to an adult child usually backfires, right? Is that your experience, Chris?
Yeah. And, I think the place that we're at, we really want to be that consultant for our kids. And we want to share our opinion with them, but we're not going to force it on them or
Yeah.
anything. But when they do ask, then that's a win to us. You know, we're just, oh, that's so great that they not only want to be around us, they want to know what we think now.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things you.
Yeah, I imagine, since I'm not there yet, but I imagine that can be hard. You know, just it's a different stage of parenting. Again, it's a much more hands-off stage. It can feel like that, especially coming from caregiver, crafter, cheerleader, coach. And, you know, there could be that empty nest feeling, like, you know, a sense of loss, which I do think it's really important to acknowledge. With change comes loss, and that is important to acknowledge that. But I can also imagine, and from my own experience as a young adult, that can be such a beautiful thing. I remember outside of college, I had graduated, I had been dating someone seriously, and I was really confused because nothing was wrong with the relationship, but I did feel like something was missing. But because nothing was wrong with the relationship, I'm like, am I making a huge mistake? And I just didn't know how to navigate through that. And I remember calling my mom at one point at sort of a pivotal stage. And I wasn't the type, I'm still kind of not the type to just cry in a conversation easily. But I was bawling on the phone with her. I was just like, I'm so lost. I don't know what to do. And just having someone in my corner that I can talk to, that I knew was there for me my entire life. I mean, my mom was there for me when I was, you know, from birth to all my elementary stage, to all my middle school stages, all my high school stage, to know that, you know, I could call somebody up who knew me like that, who I knew would be there for me, was such a beautiful thing. And we weren't the type of people to call. We're not like the daily callers or even the weekly callers. I was living pretty independently. I was teaching English in Korea actually at that time.
But were you living interdependent?
Oh, but there
I
you
see what you
go.
did there.
And if you want to know
Yes,
more about that
that's
and
good.
haven't heard our first episode, go back and listen, parents. But it's so true. Just having my mom that I could be interdependent with, to have that community, it was a beautiful thing. Right. So I just imagine as parents, even though there can be a sense of loss or change that can be maybe a little disheartening at times or confusing, it's a time where you can reap the harvest, you know, and the joy of this season, and see your children living their best life while still being able to be a blessing to them.
Yep. And it's the first time in your parenting journey where you actually feel like it's appropriate to sort of be the friend of your kids.
Yeah.
Right. All the other stages, there's that tension of, am I a friend or a parent? Well, I'm a parent. That's why I have to police them and give them rules. And you know, they should respect me more than they should like me. All those things that we hear as parents. And there's some validity in all that. Once they're out of the house and they're adults, there really is an appropriate time to say, I'm really their friend.
Yeah.
I really like just hanging out with them. And I'm their dad, who's their buddy, who's a little bit further along in life and might have a few things to share if you ask.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, because there are times when you feel compelled, like, I need to. What I would suggest is parents of college age and above in your consulting role is ask permission to share. You can, that way you're still being proactive.
Right.
But hey, would you mind if I shared some thoughts about what I observed
That's good.
the other night when we were playing games? You know, my son just got married in August.
Oh.
So I'm observing all sorts of things about him as a husband.
Yeah.
For the first time. I'm like, wow, okay. You know, and it's really tempting to just say, bro, don't say that.
I've been there before. Trust me.
But it's better to go, hey, would you mind if I share some thoughts
that's really
about?
good, yeah.
And again, sometimes they'll say, well, no thanks. Okay. But if you just lean in out of the gate with, bro, you know, then they're much more likely to shut you down.
Right.
So here's your goal in this stage, parents. This goes back to a little bit of the kingdom contribution, but it's different. And that is, the goal is to help your kids at this age be men and women who are reproducing their faith. Maybe that's through their children. Maybe that's through saying, hey, I've got a little bit of years under my belt as a Jesus follower. Who can I mentor spiritually?
Yeah.
But in college age and above, really the goal that we would have for our kids, I believe, is that you would help challenge them and nudge them towards being a Christian who's reproducing that faith in somebody else. It might be a peer. It doesn't have to be somebody younger.
Right.
But they're just saying, I want others to experience and to live what I'm experiencing and living.
Right. Continuing, as you said, making that kingdom contribution.
Right.
Which is such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Great. This is a lot of information,
Wow.
a lot of stages. I love all the C's: caregiver, crafter, cheerleader, coach, consultant. I will say there's a lot of information here. If you are a listener and feeling a little bit overwhelmed with the structure or the content, don't worry. We are really wanting to be intentional with you all. And as Kurt mentioned, we're going to be diving deeper into all of these areas in future episodes and breaking them apart and really wanting to give you the tips, the tools, actual skills to navigate through all of these stages and to really understand our role and how we could achieve our goals in all of these phases.
Yep.
Thanks for joining the On Purpose Parents podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, you can help us by rating and reviewing our podcast on iTunes. If you're listening on our Saddleback Parents YouTube channel, please like and leave a comment. Also, remember to subscribe to our podcast and share it with your friends. You can connect with us by texting the word parents to the number 83000, following us on Instagram at Saddleback Parents, and emailing your comments to parents@saddleback.com. As a huge thank you, you can browse our hundreds of free resources at onpurposeparents.com, all created to help you win at parenting. We'll catch you next time.